Hi, you are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of In the Ladies' Room. I met our next guest about 2 years ago at a women's health conference, and I was just blown away by her style, her candor, and her amazing sense of humor, which is great because she happens to be a comedian. But what I want to ask our listeners first is, have you ever just felt so crappy or so sick that you said, I feel like I got hit by a truck, or I feel like I got run over by a truck? Well, our next guest actually has. She's actually gotten run over by a truck, and then she wrote the book about it. So without further ado, I'm going to ask her to tell us how this happened, what came to be, and her whole story. And then, of course, I want her to tell us how we can get her book, which is terrific. Welcome, Katie McKenna. You're in the ladies' room.
Oh my goodness, I love being in the ladies' room, and I love that there was no line. This is so dreamy. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much. And yes, I mean, that is the thing that is amazing, right? Is that we all have said that. We've all said, I feel like I've been run over by a truck. It's such a universal thing. And it's always so awkward when people are like, so when did you feel like that? I'm like, oh, when I was actually run over by an 18-wheel truck. So yeah, you're exactly right. I was run over by an 18-wheel truck about 11 years ago while I was riding my bicycle in Brooklyn. I had just finished this beautiful 10-mile bike ride, and the sun was starting to rise over these low brick buildings in the morning in my neighborhood in Williamsburg. And I thought that the best way to sort of start out my day was to see this beautiful sunrise. And the truck that was on my left-hand side didn't have his indicator on, and the Mazda behind it didn't either. And so I took my right turn kind of wide and easy. And unfortunately, the truck that was to my left was actually turning and just didn't indicate. And he didn't see me. So he saw the green light and he turned, and my body was run over by the first four wheels of the 18-wheeler. And then unfortunately, because he didn't know that I was there, I was run over by the second four wheels. The thing that's incredible about this was that
you were run over twice.
Yes, exactly. That's what I like to say, is just like, and the thing that's interesting is that the only reason, part of the reason why I survived is what the doctors told me, is that I knew while I was being run over to clench my abdominal muscles, which they said helped to save some of my organs, which is.
I remember you saying that when I first heard you talk about this, and I just thought how incredible, first of all, how incredible the whole story is, but second of all, had you had this incredible mental clarity.
Yeah.
That in that moment, you actually were thinking, here come the second set of wheels, how do I protect myself? As opposed to, I think most of us would go to generalized freak out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's an amazing thing, right? How much the brain wants to save the body so the brain can live. And that's the most incredible thing. And that really was my biggest takeaway, I think, reflecting on it, is how badly I wanted to live. That everything that I can do in that moment, I know that we've talked, that the thing that's also incredible is that I stayed conscious the whole time. So I wasn't wearing a helmet, which I do not recommend to anybody do. Always wear a helmet, please. This was not a good call. But I was conscious the entire time, and I knew enough to remember my parents' phone number, which was incredible, so that they knew what was happening, because I not only didn't have an ID, I didn't have anything on me, and I also wasn't wearing any underpants, which is another story.
Your mother always told you to make sure you wear clean underwear in case you ever have to go to the emergency room.
I will tell you, Dr. Donica.
Every history has said that.
I know. My mother, my grandmother on all sides, aunts, cousins, like every woman has always told you to do that. And I will tell you, from experience, it is as embarrassing as they tell you when they are cutting off your clothes and you're starting to be like, I'm not wearing underpants because I was working out. Like, you don't know. It's so awkward. And I tried to make a joke about it to the EMT. And when he didn't laugh, I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. Like, this is hilarious. And he's not laughing. So
that's also really remarkable that your your desire to be funny and to entertain your audience, even when it was only the EMT guy,
I know,
was pretty striking. But I also remember you talking about the Good Samaritans, the people who came over to help you. Tell us about them. That was pretty remarkable.
It was unbelievable. And the couple that was in the Mazda that was behind the truck, Giselle and her boyfriend, Giselle's boyfriend, and I don't remember his name, but they got out of their car, and the thing that blows my mind still is that they ran towards the danger, right? Like, this was obviously a very dangerous intersection. And yet they got flares from the back of their car. They directed traffic around me. Giselle took my hand, and she asked me if I knew my parents' phone number, and I did. And that's how they knew what had happened. If they didn't, then they would have no idea, because I wasn't conscious after I went into surgery. And she was just incredible. She left a message for my parents. And then the thing that still is like almost hard for me to wrap my head around is that a man parked his car across the street, and I still remember what he's wearing, which is amazing, is that he was wearing khaki cargo shorts, a Madras short sleeve button-down shirt, and a New York Yankees hat. And he came over to my spot in the asphalt, and he took my hand and he said, "Listen to me. I'm a pastor. I've spoken to God, and you're not going to die today." And I said, "Do you promise?" And he said, "I promise." And it was, I still get goosebumps. I just can't even believe it. And then he and Giselle, and I'm not that they would ever know, but I'm Catholic, and I grew up, saying the Our Father, and he and Giselle held hands, and the three of us said the Our Father while I laid there with tire tracks on my stomach. Like, I just can't believe that people would, on a Tuesday morning before work, go so far out of their way to give comfort and kindness to a perfect stranger.
Now, so somebody obviously called 911.
Yes.
Did the truck driver stop? Was he involved in this process?
I got to be honest with you. He did stop, but he stopped about a block and a half later, I think, because people started beeping their horns because he didn't know he'd run me over. He apparently could not come back to the accident scene because he couldn't see the carnage of what his very honest mistake caused. It was too hard for him. And interestingly enough, he came to the hospital when I was in the ICU, and he wanted to apologize. But my parents just said I was still like intubated. I was in and out of consciousness, and they thought maybe it would be too much for me. And I'm sure that they were right. The only people you should really see in the ICU is your family and very, very close friends. But since then, we've never been in contact, interestingly enough. And my hope and prayer is that he knows that I'm okay.
I hope the pastor is listening to this. And Giselle, did you stay in touch with her?
Well, Giselle, we actually my parents apparently sent her a very beautiful basket which is like, what do you put in the basket of like, you're like, here's some apples. Thank you for saving my daughter's life. I hope you enjoyed chocolate covered strawberries. They're the treat of heroes. So they did have her phone number and her address for a while, but, and I tried to get back in touch with her about a year later when I was really had fully healed, and the number was out of service. Aww. And I haven't been able to be in touch with her. I know, which I would absolutely love, because I'm curious of whether or not the pastor was a real person, or if he was an angel, if she saw what I saw.
Sometimes real people are angels.
Oh, I love that. You're exactly right. I think
sometimes there are heroes amongst us, like Giselle. So Giselle, if you're listening, or anybody who's listening knows Giselle, please have her get in touch with us.
Yes.
Our email is askdrdonica@gmail.com. Please reach out. That would be kind of an awesome first. But you also told me a not so good story that stuck with me because I was angry and hostile when I heard it. Yeah. Which was, there was I don't remember if it was a physician or a nurse, somebody with in the hospital who was not so encouraging.
Yes.
You say.
There were a few instances of a lack of encouragement. The first one was when I was being wheeled into surgery, into the emergency room. And, I'd seen enough hospital dramas to know that what you ask is, am I going to be okay? That's what the patient asks when they get in there. Am I going to live? And the doctor looked me in the eye and she said, no, you're probably not going to live. You're probably going to die.
I'm still not over that. I still just am hoping that you were delirious and not
I know
correctly, although from everything you've said, you were really lucid. And that makes me really angry.
Yeah.
So on behalf of the medical profession, I apologize.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know I've done some research on this, trying to understand why that might have happened, right? And I read this memoir of, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but of an EMT and also an emergency room doctor, where it's like, if they see that a patient is struggling, that their experience was like struggling, or if they're between life and death, that they want for them to kind of let go. I think that what they didn't realize was like, I just was not ready to let go, and
it wasn't, you didn't deserve that for somebody who, is really terminal.
Absolutely.
And, obviously, the point of this story is it's a miraculous what your surgeons were able to accomplish.
Oh, amazing.
In 10 hours of surgery. Can you tell us what body parts were broken and needed to be fixed? And I assume you had many surgeries after that.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand. And obviously now we're all mourning from the horrific carnage in 3 mass shootings in 1 week. Today's actually the 218th day of the year. And there have been 291 mass shootings this year alone. We always focus on the people who didn't make it because we count the bodies. We don't focus on what people go through in the aftermath, aside from that first 24 hours. Yeah. But this has been an 11-year journey for you.
Yeah.
So tell us what the immediate surgery was and then how many surgeries you've had since then.
Sure. And that's so insightful. And you're exactly right, is that we forget about those repercussions. And that people want to say, oh, okay, well, you survived, so you're fine, right? I broke all of it. Oh, exactly. And you're surviving, and shouldn't you be so grateful versus, which is something that's tough that people live with every day. For me, I broke all of my ribs. I fractured my pelvis in 5 places. I tore a hole in my bladder. I punctured my lungs. And I kind of, for a while, I lost feeling in my body below my rib cage. So, and I have, pardon?
So you're an overachiever.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. If you're going to do it, go big or go home.
So how long were you in the hospital in the immediate aftermath?
I was in the hospital for about 2 months. And then after the 2 months, my parents both took long-term disability, and they both let me move in with them. I was about 24 at the time. I moved in with them, and they took time off of work 1 month at a time. And I had basically in-home hospital care at their home, at the house where I grew up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Again, we're giving a shout out to all the caretakers and caregivers, which is a theme in this podcast because none of us can operate on our own. But I understand you had subsequent surgeries.
Yes, I had about, I believe 7 surgeries after that.
So that's pretty remarkable. Your attitude is remarkable. Did you do stand-up comedy before this happened?
I did. Yes, I started doing stand-up. I studied theater in college, and then when I studied abroad at an acting school, the British American Dramatic Academy, and one of my directors told me that I was much more interesting in person than I was on stage, and I was like, okay. I was like, all right, so what do I do with this? And I was like, well, what is something where I can be on stage and sort of be myself and that I don't have to audition? And I was like, well, you can do stand-up, really all you need to do is maybe pay $5 or have a 2-drink minimum. So I started to do that my senior year in college. And I after college, I moved to Ireland, did stand-up there, came back to New York, worked full-time, and then would do stand-up in the evenings. And then I've been doing stand-up at that point for about, I'd say, 4 years by the time that my accident happened. Yeah. And I think that does help my attitude, but I also grew up in a funny family, or kind of in a place where optimism ruled, of the idea of being like, if you have to laugh to keep from crying. And I think that was very much the way that we tried to approach everything. And I myself did, of trying to make jokes around the things that hurt me so I felt like I had some control over it. sometimes making other people life makes you laugh, makes you feel in control.
Of course, in the ladies' room, we are big believers in laughter being the best medicine, but laughter also is a great defense mechanism. A lot of people criticize people who make light of their situation, people's situations, by saying, oh, that's just a defense mechanism. But a defense mechanism is designed to help you overcome tremendous adversity, which you clearly have. Yeah. So one thing we opened with, we've all said at one point, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. Another thing we all say, and this is another mommyism that we all say to our children, is you have to get back on the bike. Or you have to get back on the horse. Yeah. Get back on the bike. And how long did it take you to get back on the bike?
My PTSD was pretty intense. I was having about 40 flashbacks a day. And there was the good things about being conscious, which was being able to be in touch with my family and things like that. But the negative was just that I relived it. So I went through extensive therapy and am still in therapy just to kind of keep that managed. And it took me about 2 years to get back onto a bike. And it was, interestingly enough, it was in a space where there weren't a lot of cars, and like no surprise there. I was like, you know what I'm going to do? Go down Broadway at rush hour and see how I feel. Baptism by fire. I wound up going to, there is this festival in the desert called Burning Man. And I was there, and the way to get around really was on bikes. And it was a very beautiful moment of overcoming my fear and also of seeing the beauty that there is of riding a bike, of feeling the wind in your hair, and that moment of fully telling my fear that it wasn't the boss of my life, and that there's space for fear, and there's also space for incredible, beautiful joy, and you have to be okay with trying to have both.
That's awesome. And I understand now you're a professional speaker, a motivational speaker, a life coach. Tell us about what you've learned in your journey on the road while you're sharing your story. I'm sure people come up to you all the time and share their stories back and talk about how you've inspired them.
Yeah, it has been some of the most meaningful work that I could ever imagine being a part of and of doing. And it is amazing that when you're vulnerable and you share what's happened to you, that people immediately want to share what's happened with them, which is so special. It just feels like they're giving you such a gift. The things that I've learned about other people is that you have no idea what people have been through just by looking at them. None. And that people are carrying so much inside of them, and yet they are gritty. And especially women. I feel like women are just so gritty and so resilient and so capable. And I think that's been my biggest thing, is that, and also the idea that sometimes we, in the same way that doctor did, is sometimes we need a reminder about our own humanness and about what our needs are and how we can best truly support each other. Something else that's been interesting is talking a good bit about gratitude while in these talks, about how we can recapture that, because where there's gratitude, there's joy. And that's kind of been the most beautiful thing. I think with coaching, the thing that's been the most wonderful has been that every person is capable of overcoming challenges. I was told by doctors that I would never walk again, that I'd never live a normal life. And to be able to bring that to other people and to support them while they're trying to rebuild their lives. That I always say that like being run over by a truck is as if like your life has been shattered into a million pieces and you just don't know where those pieces belong. To work with people while they've had their own run over by a truck moment and help them to put the pieces back together has just been incredible. And the thing that I've learned is, just as I was saying, like, there is nothing that we can't overcome. Nothing.
That's incredible. So we have good news to share too, that you're a newlywed.
I am, yes.
You're not the first newlywed in the ladies' room. We've had Shan Booty was here before you, shortly after her wedding.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So how did you meet your husband? And is he in your life before the truck or afterwards?
Well, we actually met through a mutual friend, which was the internet. So
I was going to say, you met the old-fashioned way.
I know, right? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, we met online, which was pretty incredible. And
site or a chat room or
we met through a dating site through OkCupid, and it was actually he was one of the first people that I'd ever messaged first, which was kind of funny. And we dated for about 4 years, and we got engaged about a year ago, and it was wonderful. We had a great, very happy wedding, but it was one thing I will say that's interesting about having a traumatic experience, and one that you can see on the outside, because my body, because of all my surgeries, I have a lot of scars, and it's an interesting thing to have one of those conversations and fast forward, right? Of being like, here is where my baggage lies. It's like, third date, you're like, okay, so I was run over by a truck. And like, to see him just be so not fazed and so understanding and loving and great about it, I was like, okay, I could get behind this. This guy is a good guy. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
People who are just listening to this as a traditional podcast and aren't seeing the video, you're a strikingly beautiful woman and fit and, very perky and have a wonderful smile. And one of the things that I've learned from my daughter, she talks a lot about, she performs often for groups of veterans. And she talks about wounds that you can see versus wounds that you can't see.
Yeah.
So obviously, most of your scars are, from what I can see, are all covered up by clothes.
Yes.
And we appreciate you wearing clothes in the ladies' room. We always love it when our guests wear clothes. Although we don't have a dress code. And you talked about the PTSD, which for people who don't know is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a wound that you can't see. There's no visible scars from PTSD, but those are probably the worst scars. We've talked about PTSD on this podcast in 2 previous episodes, one with civil rights attorney and 3-time Olympic champion gold medal swimmer Nancy Hogshead, who had PTSD as a result of being brutally raped and assaulted. And one from Dr. Jacqueline Schildkraut, who is a very highly regarded expert in mass shootings research. And she developed post-traumatic stress disorder just from her work with mass shooting victims. So how do you think the PTSD compared to your physical trauma? Where did that play out for you?
That's a great question. I'm in physical pain all the time. So I haven't known a moment without pain in about 11 years. It varies, which is great. The thing about the PTSD is that it surprises you. It is a sneak attack. When my husband proposed, he proposed in the middle of the Williamsburg Bridge, which was wonderful. But as soon as he proposed, I thought to myself, we're going to get run over by a truck. I'm going to die immediately. That is exactly, I was like, I am so happy. My life is so beautiful. I'm going to die. And that's a thing that is sad, is of knowing that the PTSD kind of steals joy on occasion, because you think that because your life gets run over by a truck and that you don't know when that truck's going to show up. So I think that it's the physical pain I've begun to accept as a truth, and just realizing that like probably it will only get worse as I get older, and that's okay. And just being joyful with what my body is capable of doing. The PTSD, I think sometimes just because it's such a sneak attack.
Okay. And so you said you're in therapy. Are you also on medication for the PTSD?
I'm not on medication for the PTSD, just because it didn't seem to help when I first started. But I think medication is amazing. It just wasn't working for me, unfortunately.
Right. And everybody's process is different. Everybody's treatment is different. But I do want to go on record, just because this has come up in the media with one of our presidential candidates who decided to go off on medications being bad. That is not true. And many, many people find great relief with medication.
Absolutely.
Pain situation, I want to talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Talk about being in chronic pain, which is something I know a little bit about.
I know.
And one of the first things we always said, the doctor thing, the doctor question is always, okay, does anything make it better?
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to manage it with medication, or are you able to manage it with other forms of intervention?
Great question. So I do yoga, which helps a lot. I use CBD, which has been very helpful, topical as well as, oral droplets.
And for people who don't know,
yeah,
CBD is cannabidiol, and it is extracted from hemp or from the same place that, we get marijuana.
Yeah.
But it does not have the THC component, which is the psychoactive component.
Exactly. And it's been incredibly helpful. I also, I'm a huge fan of Advil all day, every day. And I do a lot of meditation and Pilates. And so I've been trying mostly just because I was on about 300 milligrams of Oxycontin a day and on a morphine pump. And so that wound up just not being great for my body. And so as I weaned myself off of it, I just kind of tried to do anything that I could alternately to kind of help me to maintain where I am for right now, which has been great.
That's awesome. And, what you've talked about too, is that very often when we approach chronic pain or the treatment of chronic pain, it's certainly not a one size fits all therapy, but also it's not usually one modality that works. Usually we're talking about a whole combination of things that work, and different things work at different times, or different things work together. And what about sleep?
Sleep, I try to sleep as much as I can. I go to bed early. I go to bed at about 10, between 9 and 10. But I am an early riser, just because I think I try to tell people that it's because I think like of almost losing my life. I'm just like obsessed with living. I'm like, oh my God, it's a new day. I can't wait. Like so late.
Yoga, Pilates, and
exactly. I got to squeeze it in.
Yoga, Pilates, and what else?
Meditating. So yeah, so it definitely does. It does take a bite out of your day. But you're exactly right. I do it first thing in the morning, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, and that's great when you can get into that kind of routine. And that's the other thing that's good for managing chronic pain. Your body likes routine. We actually talked about this with Dr. Michael Bruce, who's a sleep expert, about how our bodies like this, sort of schedule to our day and our circadian rhythms. And that's actually very good for sleep. But it's great that you're able to sleep, because a lot of people with chronic pain talk about how the number one problem is that the pain interferes with getting a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it'll sometimes wake me up, but luckily I fall asleep just fine, but sometimes it'll wake me up in the middle of the night.
So shifting gears, with having become a life coach, was that, I assume that was in the aftermath of all of this. Are your clients generally people who have their I got hit by a truck moment, or they're all comers?
They're all comers, really. I've worked with a few clients who have had trauma, and obviously it's very different from being a therapist. It's more of being like, here's a specific challenge that I had that might be directly related to their accident or their crash or their trauma. And then we try to get over it, in about 6 months. So different from therapy, where it's like, as I mentioned, I've been seeing my same therapist for 11 years. I'm like, I'm still coming back. But it has been, it'll be people who are looking to change jobs, if they're looking to make a shift in their life, if they're dealing with low self-worth and they're trying to build up their confidence, trying to change their nutrition. It really, it runs the gamut, which is really fun, because it's so great to meet so many different people.
One of the things I love about this conversation is very often when we're talking about any kind of medical or psychological intervention that involves insight from people, we try to get at what's their aha moment. What was that moment of clarity? What was the moment you realized that you needed to make a change? That old joke about the light bulb. Yeah. How many doctors does it take to change a light bulb? Just, one, but they. But you also made this comment about you're hit by a truck moment. And I think that's a really good exercise for everybody who's listening to think about. What was your aha moment in your life, but also what was your hit by a truck moment? Like, where was what was the absolutely worst day of your life, or the absolutely worst thing that ever happened to you? And I think in terms of gratitude, most people who are listening to this should probably feel very grateful that their hit by a truck moment was not quite as bad as being actually hit by a truck. And sometimes when we list the things we're grateful for, I used to do this exercise that was kind of my version of meditating before I fell asleep. After I had my hit by a truck moment, I would literally, before going to sleep, just close my eyes and start with the beginning of the day and kind of mentally list all the things I was grateful for. And sometimes I just had to start with, I'm breathing, or I got through this day. And that's okay. Yeah. Because it's something to be grateful for. And many of us don't appreciate that. But do you do similar exercises with your clients?
I do, absolutely. Or of being like, gratitude, I think, is important. And I think also the things that you know to be true, and especially if they're positive, of being like, I'm able to pay all my bills, or there's food in my refrigerator. Like, I know that is true. And that so often we have so much insecurity around the things that we feel like we're not doing enough of. And I think that taking those like small bites and those little victories and being really clear about them, I think that that's a big deal. And also being grateful and proud of the things that you've done. Like, be grateful to yourself of being like, you chose to get a life coach because you should be like, really, you're trying to be better. Like, that's, your brain wants for you to be better and knows that you can. You believe in, even though you might not believe in yourself right now, you believe in yourself enough to believe that you're capable of change. And that's a beautiful thing.
And capable of improvement and positive.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, of positive improvement. 100%. So
we have a tremendous amount to be grateful for and be proud of.
Yes.
And I know everybody listening does. So I just want you to throw out, in no random order, or in any random order, your top 5 tips for people who feel like they're floundering and kind of get back on track, whether or not they've had an actual hit by a truck moment.
Yeah. I think that the first thing that I would recommend if you're feeling like you're floundering is reach out to people, verbalize it. Do not let that floundering feeling kind of lie in shame. You shouldn't be ashamed. Just let people be like, I'm having a really tough time. I'd also try to find small wins wherever you can. If there is something that you can do that you know makes you feel good about you, do it, and do it immediately. I do think that making a list of things that you're grateful for, I think that is a wonderful thing. And start with like breathing in and out. I am grateful that I can walk places. I think that that's a really big deal. And I would also say that if there's something that you can do that is kind for another person, that gives us unbelievable joy, because when we feel like, either when we're at the bottom of the barrel or if we're having a rough day, when we do a kindness for someone else and we can sort of see ourselves through someone else's eyes, I think that that's a really big deal.
We actually had a podcast episode with Susan Spencer, who's the editor-in-chief of Ladies Home Journal. And she actually wrote a book called 365 Acts of Kindness. So an act of kindness every day. But I'm so glad you brought this acts of kindness thing up, because I heard an incredibly inspiring story just today out of El Paso in the aftermath of the El Paso shooting. There's an 11-year-old boy named Ruben Martinez who started the online hashtag El Paso Challenge. And what this 11-year-old boy challenged everyone to do in the aftermath of the El Paso shooting is a random act of kindness for each of the 22 victims of the El Paso shooting. And this is caught on by storm, and people are doing this all over. But absolutely, if you can help somebody else, with their problems, it makes you forget your own problem for just a little bit. But it also shows the power that you have. So one of the things that I challenge people, if they were having trouble thinking of a random act of kindness to start with, for all of us who are healthy adults and able-bodied, giving blood is a really good place to start.
Brilliant.
Because that really can actually save a life. I'm sure you had blood transfusions as part of your surgeries. But that can really save a life. And of course, in the summer months, the Red Cross reports that they are really down in blood donations. So for anybody who's having trouble thinking of a place to start, that's a really good place to start. And then I cut you off before you got to the last.
Oh, no, not at all. And also you get juice and cookies. And who doesn't love juice and cookies?
Free juice and cookies.
Exactly. Free juice, free cookies. It's wonderful. And the last thing that I'd say is sometimes is to try to help you if you're feeling like you're floundering, is to write down your goal. Write it down. Don't just think about it. Think about the thing that you would want to ideally be or achieve in the next 6 months. And then if you can, if that isn't like too much, then try to think about what it would take for you to get there in 6 months. Break it down. Break it down into these very small bites. And then I say it's all small bites, little victories. Do the small bite and then celebrate it as soon as you achieve it. And that's the way that we get to our goals. It's not a miracle. I didn't start walking out of nowhere. I didn't Pollyanna out of my wheelchair. What I did was I took very, very small steps, small things in order to get to the place that I was. And that's how we find success, I think. Absolutely.
And the other thing too, when we talk about recovering from some major medical trauma, is that recovery isn't linear. It's not a little bit better every day. Sometimes you really do have to take 1 step forward and 2 steps or 3 steps or 14 steps backward. And then you can make incremental improvements over time. So I love your suggestion about writing down the goals, and certainly 6 months goals. But for a lot of people, the goal has to be, what's my goal today?
Yes, absolutely.
And for some people that we've spoken to, sometimes that goal is getting out of bed, which is, a very, very big deal for either people with overwhelming physical injuries or ailments, but also people who have depression.
Yeah.
Or people who have overwhelming, mental health struggles, getting at it, or fatigue.
Yes.
Certainly we've talked to people with chronic fatigue syndrome, but also any kind of fatigue or exhaustion or grief. Because sometimes, as overwhelming as the situation is for you, I'm sure it was very overwhelming for your mother in a very different way.
You are so 100% right. And I think and because of it was very overwhelming for them. And also because they put all of their feelings on the back burner, it was a rubber band, right? And then it was stretch and stretch and stretch. And then I was well. And then for them, it snapped. And they had to kind of manage a lot of the trauma and the stress. And they really kept such a brave face on for so long. And I'm one of 4 children. So it wasn't like they just had me to focus on. They really were. It was a lot for them, and they really handled it so beautifully. I'm so lucky to have such incredible parents.
That's incredible. So in all of this process, you've been to, so many doctors and so many hospitals and so many visits. And by the way, I know I did beat up on that one doctor who told you that you weren't going to make it. However, we don't really know who she was.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking she then went into the operating room and saved your life.
Absolutely.
So I do want to acknowledge that, that she did operate on you for 10 hours.
Yeah, it's not like she was like going outside and was like, you know what, I'm going to go get a soda. I'll get a bag of chips. This kid's lost anyway.
So, that's the interesting dichotomy, of being in that situation. I do have to say, every patient that ever asked me that, I absolutely said with as much conviction as I could muster, yes, you are
amazing.
But you've been in a lot of ladies' rooms.
Yes.
In the past 11 years. So I want you to tell us, since we're in the ladies' room, aside from this interview, what was the most unique, interesting, different, or memorable ladies' room story?
Oh goodness. Well, this is a ladies' room that wasn't a ladies' room. So because of the fact that I couldn't walk, and we had a really crazy thing because of my bladder function. I had a catheter that was on most of the time. And then there was, something was put in incorrectly, blah, blah, blah. The yada, yada, yada of all of it is that my catheter got removed earlier than it should have. So I was in a position where, pardon?
Intentionally or accidentally?
Oh, there was the nurse who put in the catheter before I left the hospital, unfortunately did the wrong size. And I wound up getting a kidney infection. And luckily I had asked the nurse, like, what happens if I need to remove this myself? And she gave me the instructions, but was like, you're crazy. You're never going to have to do this. And it was the next day and I got a kidney infection And, and so, because we're all ladies, we know that is not ideal. And so I wound up being able to remove it, but like from my hospital bed, like it was a real mess. So I didn't get to
call button on your
Oh, no. It was when I was back in my parents' house.
Oh.
It was like the first night that I was back. My parents, we had to call the ambulance. They're like, is this really a good idea? Do we think I to see it? So later on, the idea, like the ability the urge to use the bathroom was like really, when it came, I was like, oh my gosh, I really have to go. My ex-boyfriend, or my boyfriend at the time, he was sitting with me, we were watching football or something. And I was like, oh no. And I turned to my sister, and my sister and I had like a code word about if I needed for everybody to leave the room. I was like, Callie, I could really use some blueberries. She's like, Andrew, she's like, go outside, go get Katie some blueberries right now. She shuts like all of the doors, gets me a bedpan, and like, we continue to make full eye contact the whole time, where I was like, thank you. Like, just.
And those are the best blueberries
the best blueberries of my life. It would have, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what I would have done. But that was a top 5.
But for future reference, blueberries can be very irritating to the bladder. So anybody who's listening, let's not have blueberries.
Don't have blueberries. Don't do it.
We have a bladder infection or kidney infection. Well, it is always wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us in the ladies' room. And tell people again the name of your book and where they can get it.
Sure. It's How to Get Run Over by a Truck. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it, it's at Barnes & Noble. You can kind of find it, or at my publishers, which is insurance.com.
And your website is?
It's www.katiecmckenna.com.
Yay. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay in touch. And good luck with everything, including your marriage. We wish you every happiness and your continued very good health.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you do on this podcast. It's fascinating and helpful and really a gift. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I get to talk to wonderful people.
It's the dream.
Take care. Thanks again.
Thanks.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.